Hello, you beautiful degenerates, and welcome to Links and Locks, the Action Network's golf betting podcast presented by Bet365. Alongside Nick Bretwish and Spencer Aguiar, I'm Roberto Arguello, and this is your Players Championship Tournament Betting Preview. It is the best field in golf, at least outside of the majors, coming to you live from TPC Sawgrass, the stadium course this week. We're really excited for what should be an awesome tournament to watch. For my money, the best three-hole finishing stretch, really the best back nine, in my opinion, on the PGA Tour. And I'll play that at any major. Best three holes, best 9 holes to finish. I'm super excited. Guys, we are coming off a winning week. Spencer, you had an outright hit on Scotty Scheffler, so congrats to you. Didn't even have to sweat. Could have put your feet up and relaxed on that back nine coming at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. So, Spencer, I will give you the box. What is your best bet this week?
We were talking a little bit about this off air. I think this is a fun week for outright bets. DFS contests are very intriguing. I always try, though, to be straightforward about my thoughts on an event when we record this show. I don't know how else to say this, guys. This board is brutal for betting. Didn't really like any of the matchups because of the lack of structural appeal when you dive into TPC Sawgrass. I am going to give one for this section. I do think that this play is about as volatile as you can find because of both of their profiles. This is probably not the greatest selling point. I think this bet probably goes miscut versus miscut. We have been really good historically at hitting those, but I'm going to take a golfer who's outside the top 60 of my model. I'm going to oppose a golfer who's 137th for me. Chesson Hadley, minus 115 over your boy, Roberto, and Vincent Norman.
All right. Chesson Hadley, minus 115 over Vincent Norman. Nick, what's your best bet for the players?
Well, I have about 2 bets for the time being. As Spencer mentioned, very tough board for me to find value on. I hate to even say this name. I'm going to go with Tony Finau, 62-1 outright to win. And I'm going to mute.
All right. Where he be now? Tony Finau, after skipping the API, Nick is betting him outright to win the players. My best bet this week, I'm going to go with Eric Van Rooyen for a top 40. He is plus 130, where ties pay in full. Before we get into that cap and Tony Finau, Spencer, why are you backing Chesson Hadley against my boy, Vincent Norman?
Probably more of a fade against Norman than anything. Like, Norman presented this extremely boomer bust profile inside of my model. He was a golfer, and you kind of pinpointed this, Roberto. Like, the critical ball striking metrics that we've seen recently have been great. But when you look at what he's provided, there's really been no results that he has shown from that. He hasn't posted a top 35 since his win at the Barbasol in July. The off the tee and green and regulation metrics are going to generate intrigue for him. I think if he puts the pieces together here and brings his A game, there is much more upside on what Vincent Norman can provide than Chesson Hadley. It just came down to the sheer downside of the short game and the weighted proximity metrics for me that made him one of the better fade candidates to consider inside of my sheet. He ran the critical range of 0 to 150 yards with his irons. That's something that I'll talk about a little bit more on the show of why I like that distance. 104th overall with his approach game. And then he landed 133rd in expected scrambling for what is a very volatile TPC Sawgrass track. It just so happens, like, I don't know what the reason is behind it. Maybe it's the lack of upside that Hadley presents. Our best bet a couple of weeks ago that I presented on here was Hadley over Kuchar. This is for the same reason that Kuchar had that boomer bust profile that I was trying to take on. We'll see here. This has been, if you just look this year, Hadley's gotten the best of Norman for the past 8 tournaments. If you stretch this back to July of 2023, he's also beaten him each time they've been matched up together. I don't necessarily disagree with the market. If you look, and this is probably the one time I'll ever give this answer, you might be able to actually wait and get a better price here because the market seems to be moving against and backing Norman. I understand the reason for that. This is low upside with not really a ton of like safety to begin with in Hadley, against a profile in Norman that at least has upside to him, and then a floor that is as low as you can possibly find. So normally in these tournaments with cuts, I try to take on that volatile profile. We'll see. This is kind of an all or nothing thing right now for Norman. If he's on the first page of the leaderboard after day one because of that ball striking, there's that potential. But some of those weighted proximity numbers were really tough for me to ignore inside of my sheet. I know that, by the way, was like the most energetic pitch I could ever give about why a play is the best bet of the week for me, but it just kind of explains what this tournament is.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Vincent Norman has been exceedingly poor around the green and with the putter, losing with the putter in every start, all 6 so far this season on the PGA Tour, losing with on the round the green 5 out of 6, including each of the last 5, and none of those have been particularly close. Chesson Hadley at least can putt and has had a couple strong around the green performances. I will back up Vincent Norman and say that in his 4 starts on the DP World Tour, those are all top 30s since the end of last year's Tour Championship. So he does have some strong results, just haven't been on the PGA Tour. So just want to cover our bases there because I know you don't bring in DP World Tour into your model. So just wanted to say that. But also, I thought you made a joke on Matt Kuchar having boomer bust potential because I thought you called him a boomer. I just misheard that, and I don't know how high of a ceiling he has, but doesn't matter. He finished like almost dead last at the Cognizant Classic. So you catch that bet on Hadley, and best of luck to you this week. I think if I have access to it, I might tell you as well. Nick, Tony Finau didn't play last week. We saw him most recently in Mexico at the Mexico Open at Vidanta, defending his title. He finished, I believe, 13th there at Vidanta, but he shifted his putting style. That toe on his putter, not as high in the air. Why do you like him this week at TPC Sawgrass?
Well, my numbers pretty much think it's Scotty against the world this week. So obviously I'm not going to take Scotty Scheffler at the 6 to 7 to 1 range. So this is a pure number grab for me. So in terms of things that I'm looking for, I'm sure the whole world is looking for just elite ball strikers in elite form. Tony Finau grades first for me in expected strokes gained approach. Damn near from all ranges too. So the short wedges, everything, and there's longer wedges. This course just demands a lot. The bunker percentage for me, expected sand save, is good. The scrambling is good. The short hands around the green when he does miss a green regulation is good. Really, it's just the putter. If his putter was performing just a little bit, and it's kind of like the reverse Scotty Scheffler, like he did gain strokes putting in Mexico with the new putting form. So, maybe the toe down is all he needed. So I'm kind of going to bet on the same thing that everybody is now betting on, especially in DFS with chasing Scotty Scheffler, is that he learned how to putt. I'm going with Tony Finau here, and my numbers best ball striker overall, and 62 to 1 is a crazy price when my numbers have it at 45. Again, it's probably Scotty's tournament to lose, but I'll take him on with a high upside, high pedigree guy like Tony Finau, who should be able to handle the P-tie runoffs and all that good stuff with all the trouble, bunkers, water, everything. So with how volatile it is, give me a long number on Tony Finau.
I love it. I found 65 to 1 in the market, so everybody be sure to shop around. But I'm also all for Tony Finau this week. So let's ride. Come on, Tony.
Has he ever heard us though, like on this podcast history? And also, real quick, congrats to Spencer on Scotty Scheffler last week, but more so congrats just for his mental well-being and everything. Webb Simpson, T30, like that's a big win for the Aguilar household right there. So I'm sure he would return that Scotty Scheffler winnings for Webb to be a top 10 last week, but still top 30. Webb Simpson is back. Spencer's back. This is big stuff, guys.
Yeah, I mean, take all my money if you can give me a Webb Simpson top 10 in a tournament, especially of that stature last week.
Shout out Webb at the API. The Wake Forest connection proves true again. Moving back this week to TPC Sawgrass for the players. My best bet is EVR Eric Van Rooyen plus 130 for a top 40 where ties are paid in full at our sponsor, Bet365. I like EVR for a variety of reasons. First off, his approach play is really high. Gained on approach in 7 straight tournaments, and this is a top 40 bet in his start so far on the PGA Tour. He's got 8 of them, and 6 of them have been top 40s. The other 2, a T52 and a miscut at the Phoenix Open, where I believe he was on the wrong edge of the wave split there. Still gained on approach in that week. So I really like the approach play. First off, it's a club down course. So even though he is above average in driving distance, I like that he can set himself up with some approaches where he can take advantage. And he's a really strong putter. almost won the Cognizant Classic in the Palm Beaches. When he finished his round on Sunday, gained almost 2 strokes per round on putting that week. We saw him win in the fall at El Cardinal as well. Don't have any data from that tournament, unfortunately, but going back to last season, in 2023, in his last 5 professional starts with data, gained strokes on approach, every single one of them. So I think he just got a really high floor on approach. I don't know how high his ceiling is. I did bet him outright, by the way, at 120 to 1, just a little sprinkle out there. Don't know that he gets it done outright, but I like his floor and I wanted to be more invested in him. Been looking for some matchups, haven't found anything that I love, but I like that the one weakness in his game is around the green, which I don't love this week. I want guys to be able to scramble because you're going to have to do it from trouble eventually. But last week he was 5th in the field in strokes gained around the green at Bay Hill. So hopefully he can keep some of that momentum going. I know it's very different without the thick rough on this golf course that we saw last week at Bay Hill. It was going to be tough, firm and fast conditions. I think as long as he can get to the weekend, he'll have a really good chance of cashing this top 40 bet. And by the way, he didn't play here last year at the Players, but 2 years ago in 2022, gained over 3 strokes per round on approach alone, and he finished tied for 13th. So I like that he has upside there. Also in his other appearance at the Players, which really wasn't an appearance, it was 2020, so he just played 1 round, but he gained a stroke and a half off the tee. So he's put the pieces together here before. He's had the pieces before at the Players. He hasn't put them together quite yet. He's only played 1 time in one official event, and that was the T13. I'm not reading too much into course history this week, but I know he's got the goods to get it done. And among the other names in that top 40 market, I really liked his at plus 130 where ties pay in full. So give me EVR right there. Guys, let's jump into our tournament or our course preview for TPC Sawgrass. Spencer, I'll give the floor to you in just a moment. We'll do the course preview. We'll get into our outrights. We'll go through the rest of our cards. Then we'll do a little one and done discussion. By the way, Nick and I got jumped by 2 people last week, so we got some catching up to do. And then we'll go through the rest of the card and any rapid fire at the end. But guys, let's get into that course preview. Spencer, I'll let you have the floor first.
I think there are a few interesting notes about TPC's Sawgrass that will make this both a challenging course to handicap, but also a little easier this year than we may have had, let's say, 10 seasons ago when running numbers. The first factor that came heavily into my model, into play inside of my model, was this move from May to March in 2019. The summer temperature in May, when you look at this course, gave us a Bermuda surface that was still dormant, playable, but dormant from the winter, and created this fiery test that made stopping your irons on these smaller than average greens nearly impossible. The lightning quick surface that we've become accustomed to over the years will still be in play. But I guess more of where I'm going with this answer is that the Bermuda grass gets overseeded on all parts of the course, which creates much softer landing areas that end up allowing shot shaping and control with your irons from anywhere on the track. There are 17 holes with water. You have 88 bunkers. All of that's put into place to cause havoc for the field. The strokes gain around the green answer is the really interesting one. We've talked about that quite frequently so far at the beginning of this show. I still think it's going to be amplified because of the smaller putting surfaces. I will say, though, I think it's hard to weigh numerically just because you get these shaved runoff areas that do allow multiple options to be considered when you're trying to get up and down from the surface. For me, that meant that I decided to run my model with a little bit more of that hint of 3-putt avoidance. I mixed in some of the strokes gain around the green, but if a golfer was good with his 3-putt avoidance, but wasn't a good around the green, they got a boost in my model. So there was a handful of names, and ironically, Eric Van Rooyen was one of those options for me that kind of got that bigger boost here from what we've seen in 2024 from some of his totals. So I do think the Pete Dye nature of forced layups is going to be critical to account for when you run a model. The rough isn't penal, but this course best suits a golfer, in my opinion, that can be creative. You need to be able to salvage par. You have to be able to avoid those critical mistakes because of the 17 holes that have water that come into play. And then you do need to be able to control your iron, since implosion potential is going to be waiting for anyone who's a little off with their game. One of the things that I got different with my model, and I'll talk about it in the outright section, at least the 2 biggest corollaries for the biggest corollary when I combine these 2 things together for success, came from how could a player scramble and how is a player from 0 to 150 yards. When you combine those 2 things together, that was like the high-end success that I found almost every single year from the players that were either winning this tournament or really working themselves up the leaderboard. And there are two names for me in particular when we talk about outrights that saw that same profile of a Scotty Scheffler last year or a Justin Thomas in 2021. So I like this from an outright betting perspective for as much as I'm talking badly about this tournament in other areas of the board. But like Nick said this best before we even came on air, and this was more of a DFS answer he was giving with it, but it's like to Scotty or not to Scotty this week. And that's what makes it so difficult, because if you believe Scotty's going to win, then you should limit your exposure across the whole board in the outright market. If you actually think that you can take him on, then there are abilities and chances to do that. So it kind of just comes down to what are your thoughts about Scotty before anything else.
So Spencer, what are your thoughts about Scotty?
I like Scotty. Now, here's the problem with it, I guess, is the downside that would come into play, at least beyond anything else. This is a highly volatile course. Maybe the most volatile course history sort of return that we can get. I talked about it last week, and I mentioned how Scotty at 7-1, I don't usually go to the top of the board, but when you can limit the inability that he has to make putts, and he made putts last week, which was even better. You can credit that to the putter change. You can credit that to maybe whatever the reason is that you want to go to with it. But when less putts need to get made, upside starts taking into more of account of these ball strikers. And Scotty's one of those names. And I think that's why he won the Players Championship last year. My biggest concern, though, is just this overall volatility of the course. So when I built this, Scotty was by far and away, for the most part, the number one player for me in expected win equity. The biggest surprise, though, came into play is that, and that's, by the way, any halfway decent model is going to give you that answer. Like, we're not reinventing the wheel here by saying Scotty's good at golf or Scotty should be the projected favorite. If you don't have that answer, there's a problem with the way that you're building your model. But I think for me, the biggest thing that I found the takeaway from is that Sam Burns had this wild ascension for me up in my model. I kept running different filters to try to navigate away from this answer that I was getting. But I thought proper price on him, as outrageous as this is going to sound, was 18-1. He opened at 40-1 to start this week. I think some of that, and maybe Nick can be credited about this a little bit. He was on Sam Burns this season, and I know it didn't necessarily result in wins, but there were a lot of performances that Sam Burns has been working himself up the leaderboard, and my model was a little bit late to react on it. It just this week decided to make this massive reaction from what we've seen. I think if we don't get the performance that he got on Sunday, I'd be very curious to see what this price would have been. That 78 kind of took him out of sight, out of mind of the implosion potential that came into play. But my sheet saw him produce 5 top 10 grades out of the 6 categories I ran. That included being one of only 2 golfers to land inside of the top 5 for weighted proximity from under 150 yards and projected scrambling at TPC Sawgrass. I keep going back to that answer as it being the best corollary expectation for high-end success. So I really like that return that I got from Burns. And then the other name that fit that answer was Max Homa. I grabbed him on Monday at 33-1. This has been a ticking time bomb in the space. Like, this number has been, I've seen it as low as 22-1 at shops. Earlier today, you could still find a 28-1 out there, which I thought was still value, but you're going to have to shop around here because this is a golfer. When you look at his profile, he's produced back-to-back top 16 finishes on tour. He has 2 top 13 results here over the past 2 seasons. And then as I go back to the answer that I keep talking about of those 2 categories, my model saw him rank first when combining that. So when I try to back test this for prior results, Scheffler ranked number 1 for that last year before he won. Thomas was number 1 in that area in 2021. It's going to take a lot more than just that combination if he wants to win the title, but it does enter him into an elite production territory when I'm trying to mimic the results from past leaderboards. I took Jordan Spieth at 40-1. I am very notoriously on this show not a Jordan Spieth person most weeks. Like, I make more of this argument about I'm not a Colin Morikawa person. I think that's also a very proper statement to be said, but it's very infrequent that I come on this show and I talk about why I like Jordan Spieth, but he saw this expected total driving increase and a weighted proximity increase inside my model that raised his ceiling output. To kind of jump into that, my model thought Spieth's baseline for total driving was 54th in this field. He jumped to 21st for Sawgrass. It saw him increase his weighted proximity by 22 spots. I obviously am still going to have some of my concerns about this boomer bust nature that he has. And I guess that one's not a joke about Matt Kuchar there. And it's not a joke about Spieth getting up there in age either with it. But I don't know. There's red flags. There's an upside profile that I like. I thought this 40-1 drift was just a very interesting thing. And then I took Brian Harman at 70-1. I came on a lot of shows last week and I talked about Brian Harman being one of my favorite fade candidates that I could find on the board. I think that makes his 12th place finish in the 5.6 shots that he gained with his irons that much more impressive than it may even look on paper. He has 2 top 8 finishes over the past 4 seasons at this tournament. That's going to show the potential upside. And then the surging approach metrics for him really do provide this critical outlook for a venue that landed him as an expected top 35 player in weighted proximity. When you add that to his short game, the top 5 returns for similar green complexes, I think you get a major championship golfer here, which probably pains Nick to hear because I know Nick is not the biggest fan of Brian Harman, but
I'm in on Harman this week. I have him written down as a quote-unquote sleeper. I don't think he'll be a sleeper, but yeah, Brian Harman made my list. The good list, the first time ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of shows how much intrigue there is around Harman. This is just a much better course fit. So if he could perform at the API, you put him here at a tournament that I would expect the upside. 70-1 for a major championship winner was just way too high in my opinion. Like I thought 40-1 was more of the proper going rate for him.
I wanted to touch on a couple of those. First off, shout out to the military veteran who last year found himself right of the fairway on the 18th hole on Friday afternoon when Jordan Spieth was one behind the cut line, sprayed his shot right, looked like it was destined for the water. The military veteran, unbeknownst to him, had his kneecap right in the way of a Jordan Spieth drive. That thing ricocheted off of there. I don't remember how far it went, but it was more than I thought was going to happen. He gets a fortuitous bout, stays out of the water. I don't know if it went in the fairway, if it stayed in the short grass, or if it stayed in the rough. Nonetheless, Spieth knocks a fairway wood up near the green, gets up and down, makes the cut. Should have bought that guy drinks for the whole weekend. Shout out to that guy. Hopefully Jordan Spieth doesn't need his services this year. I was very intrigued by Sam Burns and Max Homa, of course. I bet Max Homa last week outright at API, and I used him for one and done. I mentioned him as one of my guys I was considering here. Wanted to get different. I got different. Used him. Scotty wins. Doesn't matter. I have Burns at 45-1. Really like him on Pete Dye courses. Done really well at Austin Country Club for the match play. We saw him in contention when Nick had him at the Amex at another Pete Dye course as well this year. So I like that corollary. I like Bermuda Burns. You mentioned that this isn't a pure Bermuda grass surface with the POA overseed, given that it's March, but same surface that we saw at the WM Phoenix Open. So I like Sam Burns. I like the upside. The driver's been really accurate. So if that continues, I think that gives him a really good chance. He's also 8th in par 5 scoring this year, and only 5 holes play under par at TPC Sawgrass historically. That's the 4 par 5s and the drivable par 4 12th. So got to take advantage of those holes, and I think Burns is well positioned to do so. I also have Willie Z at 33-1. I love how straight he is off the tee, and I think that's really going to play this week. He has been strong throughout the bag since the Amex when he was still shaking the rust off. I mean, crazy to think that just 4 months ago, he was at the Hero World Challenge shooting like an 82. So finishing dead last behind Tiger Woods in his first start. So Zalatoris shot 81, in that first round, and he shot 79 2 days later at the Hero World Challenge. So it's come a long way. The putting stroke still does not look perfect, but he's maximizing what he can so far with technology, with the mallet, with the broomstick. So I think it's serviceable at 33-1. I like his chances here to stay hot with his irons. And moving on, I got Tony Finau at 65-1. He actually leads the PGA Tour in par 5 scoring this year. He also did not play last week, so avoided some potential big numbers. Shout out to Tommy Fleetwood. Moving on, I also had Keegan Bradley at 110-1. There were a lot of guys in this 110-ish to 1 range that I considered, but eventually I narrowed it down to Keegan Bradley, positional ball striker who can absolutely get it done. We saw him compete at the Sony Open this year. Also above average in par 5 scoring average. I think that on a club down on a club down course, he's got a really good chance. And 110-1 was too long. I think he should have been closer to 75. Same rationale for Cam Davis, guy who we have targeted on club down courses before. He has upside on approach, gained 1.4 strokes on approach per round last week in a really strong showing. He is a guy who gets hot in spurts. So this is really just an upside play. I don't like him really in any other markets. So give me Cam Davis. He had a top 10 here last year as well. So he can do it, but I'm not leaning on past performances at TPC Sawgrass. As you mentioned, Spencer, it's about as volatile as it gets on any golf course on the PGA Tour. I also mentioned Eric Van Rooyen. He's third in par 5 scoring this year. And I really like his putting upside. And we mentioned the momentum with around the green from last week. And then finally, I have my one Siwoo Kim-esque long shot of the week for the players. Give me a pure ball striker who can just have the week of his life and really show the potential that I think I have preached on this podcast many times before. Kevin Yu, 250-1.
I knew it.
I bet him with up to 5 places for a quarter of the payout on our sponsor Bet365, 16th in par 5 scoring average this year. He can take advantage of, if he can take advantage of the par 5s and just tread water everywhere else, he's got a chance. He does still have to putt. Bad news. I have a couple guys who just missed the card that I'm considering. Hideki Matsuyama, 40-1. Cantlay's 28-1 out there. Didn't see him up above 22, 23-1 until today. Now he's 28. So I'm thinking about that. Max Homa, I was really bullish on him last week. Spencer being bullish on him this week. He is out there at 28-1. So that is very enticing. And Colin Morikawa, you guys aren't Morikawa guys. I am. I think I bet him one time since we bet him at the Zozo when he won this year. That didn't work out for me. Whenever we bet him, I'm very intrigued on a course where his driving accuracy is an advantage over a lot of others and where his iron play will be rewarded on these smaller greens. Like Kevin Yu, he still has to put to get the ball in the hole. So I'm nervous. I think that Max Homa at a very similar price gives me a little bit more upside on the par 5s, and I like the putter more. So I'm kind of leaning toward Homa at 28-1 now that price has popped. So haven't added it to the card, but I have room. Got 0.66 units in play this week, so still have room for one more at least, depending on how we do it. Might save it for in tournament as well. That's my plays. We got Spencer's. Nick, who you got on your card outright to win the players besides Tony Finau?
That is it. The only other play I have right now, and it's kind of gross. I dug pretty deep. I did think that this was kind of a strange number my model put out, but it had Ben Martin to make the cut closer to -110. So I moved on Ben Martin to make the cut at +115. I think that is his ceiling, is making the cut. Maybe a little bit higher, but he's an older golfer, seems to be in better form with the ball striking. I know he's not making a lot of cuts, but he did miss the cut on the number at PGA National, and then missed a cut by 2 at the Waste Management Phoenix Open there, which I do not think is a good course fit for him at all. I think more of a plotter, shorter course, hit fairways, scramble a little bit is a better spot for Ben Martin. He does, I believe, have a top 5 finish here. Damn near 10 years ago, though. It was like 2015 or 2016 when I was diving deep into Ben Martin and to why my number said he's okay. I guess we'll put it that way. But yeah, that is the card right now. 0.37 units at risk in total. I'll probably move on Xander Schauffele. We can maybe touch on this more in the rapid fire, but I certainly have plenty of room in my card. Was hoping Spencer had another matchup other than the Hadley one, because it does look like that is moving in Spencer's direction as I refresh throughout this show. But we'll see maybe we got an in-pod play, but my numbers seem to really love Xander Schauffele too. So Xander Schauffele and Tony Finau, guys that I probably talk about every single week on the show, with the same exact output every single week. So I don't know if this is a good one for me to keep my mic on.
Last week we used we made an in-pod play on Ben On over Minwoo Lee. I did. I tailed Spencer in fading Minwoo Lee.
That worked.
And
it did work.
I made 2 bets fading Minwoo Lee. Both of them hit. I believe it was Zalatoris over Minwoo Lee was the other one. So shout out to Spencer for grabbing my attention there. And as we look at some odds for potential in-pod plays this week, a reminder that the Links and Locks podcast is proudly presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than anyone else. Every day, they power up the odds on hundreds of bets to get you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays. And they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. All right, gentlemen, we've gone through our outright cards. Nick, you've gone through the whole card. Spencer, anything else that you have besides the Hadley matchup and outrights?
Do you want to go first, Nick?
Yeah, question. All right. I'm looking at guys, kind of looking at this with Spencer's mindset of guys that I'm fading. Taylor Pendrith is one of those. My numbers absolutely hate him. They don't love the other guy, but what about Kurt Kitayama over Taylor Pendrith? I know Kurt blew up last week, but his ball striking is in elite form. Pendrith, I guess, has semi-course history here, but I think Kitayama is hitting the ball the best in his career. Obviously, he won the API last year, missed a cut at the Players the next week, but I feel like he can get it done. Decent scrambling numbers, too. So -115 over Taylor Pendrith is out in the market right now. Is that an in-pod play, or is that... I mean, it's miscut against miscut, I guess, but I still think Kurt Kitayama is on the better side of that.
I think you probably broke that down perfectly. I considered it myself for that reason. My model does not like Pendrith whatsoever. The problem is I didn't necessarily, and it would be the same answer I'd give to Hadley. There was just a little bit more safety, I guess, in the profile of Hadley in certain ways, maybe because of some of his putting that he could do from off the green there. But it's a very similar answer for Kitayama there, where I think that if you're comparing him versus Pendrith, you're on the right side of the matchup. My concern is that this goes miscut, though.
Yeah.
I don't know how many of those I can actually stomach this week.
What was the price on this one, Nick?
-115. I would have it at -130, but again,
I think that's probably fair, yeah.
Are very high on Kitayama's recent data. And again, I weighted the API extremely minimal just because of the volatility of that. And again, you have guys like Tommy Fleetwood, you were saying before the air, lost 5 strokes on approach on one hole. Like, that data sample size is certainly going to skew anything if you keep that tournament, in relative weight to any other, if you're pulling like the last 60 data or whatever you're doing. But so I try to take that with a grain of salt. Other than that, his iron play looks fantastic. And the scrambling's there too.
I like Kitayama. I mean, I punched my best bet on him, Phoenix Open top 10 a couple weeks ago.
Which is a great course for him, which this I don't think is, but anything against Taylor Pendrith, I think I could stomach if you guys were in, but it doesn't sound like Spencer's sold.
I like it. I don't love it. I think they're very similar golfers. I think Kitayama is a better approach player by a little bit, not an insignificant amount, but by a bit. But otherwise, they're very similar golfers, long off the tee. The one thing that gives me a little hesitation is that Pendrith hasn't had many strong results. And when he has had them, they've come on courses without data. So that might also be just a sample error, because you look at his fall. He had 3 top 15 finishes, and 2 of them there were no data. And this year he has 1 top 10. And this year he has 1 top 10, and that was at the Farmers Insurance Open, and we didn't have data from one of the rounds as well in that tournament. So I wish we had a little bit more of that data. So there's a little bit of a sample buyer beware there. But I do think overall, Kitayama's a better golfer. Kitayama is in better form throughout last week, playing as the defending champ. It's going to mentally do something to you. I like the spot of being able to buy the dip on Kitayama against a golfer that I think he is better than.
It's 2 golfers for me that are outside of the top 60 in expected strokes gained total for this course. One of the reasons why, I guess, to keep going back to the Hadley play, whether or not it's right or wrong, it remains to be seen. But Hadley kind of possessed that very similar profile of being like a fringe top 60 guy, barely working himself in. The massive difference when I'm looking at all these players, and then like I throw Vincent Norman into the mix, Vincent Norman was 133rd for me. So that's where kind of just the profile of a golfer I was looking to take on is why I went that direction. But like I said at the beginning, I looked at that play that Nick just talked about. I think that it's probably the right side in theory of where the proper value is. If you were to make me pick which side I like, which I think the last time I gave this answer, it didn't go well with it. So, I mean, take that for what it's worth. But I think it's the right side of the matchup, if nothing else.
Yeah,
Works for me.
I think it's Kitayama or nothing on that one. I don't think there's a huge edge. I had a couple matchups that I wanted to discuss. I had Matthew Pavone minus 120 over Nikolai Højgaard. Neither of these guys have ever played at TPC Sawgrass. I did take a peek in Spencer's model, and I saw that there were very positive returns on Matthew Pavone. Any thoughts on him there?
What has happened to Højgaard? That is like, even beyond anything else, what has happened to Højgaard recently? This is a very shocking, like a couple weeks ago when we talked about Højgaard, I gave him glowing reviews of how I thought he was a top 20 player on tour. And every single result that we're getting with him is just going in the wrong direction right now. I don't know if I have a massive take. I kind of, with Pavone, was considering against Straka. I didn't end up going that route. That was another bet that I ended up passing on just because of what we got last week from Pavone. But my model really liked him for whatever that's worth, which would make sense. There's very limited data that I'm getting from him on the PGA Tour, and a handful of those either resulted in a win or a top 5 finish.
Yeah, it's still a small sample size, but going into last week, I think he was top 2 in both strokes gained, putting, and approach. So that's a recipe for success no matter where you go. I like Pavone. I think Højgaard, without being able to capitalize on his driving distance advantage, give me Pavone and his really strong putting. I think he's more of a positional player, even though he does have the win at Torrey Pines this year. He doesn't have elite distance, but I like how he plays. I think he's a mentally really strong golfer, which plays around here, but you got to be playing well. So don't read too much into that. I just really like Pavone. I'm probably going to sprinkle this one 0.2 units or smaller just because it's really volatile golf course, but I'm bullish on him overall. And they're both first timers, but at this course. But give me Pavone. I think he's a better golfer than Højgaard, who is still suffering from Spenceritis after I believe Spencer used him for one and done at Mexico Open at Vidanta. Good luck to Ludwig Oberg, trying to bounce back from both of you guys using him last week, I believe. I also had another 2 matchups that I wanted to run by you guys. Ben On plus 105 over Corey Connors is one that I'm considering. For reference, Corey Connors is minus 125 in that matchup. And I also saw Tony Finau minus 110 over Corey Connors. I think this is a matchup that I thought would have been perfect before the Mexico Open when Finau really couldn't putt because Corey Connors also can't putt. But I feel a lot more optimistic about Finau's putting than I do about Connors's. However, Connors could still 2-putt and shoot 2 under every round and win this matchup and get the top 10 this week. I'm hesitant in fading somebody in Corey Connors who has such a great ability, ball striking, but it's not just the putting where Finau has the advantage. He's significantly better around the green, and Nick mentioned this earlier. So that's why if I had to bet one of these two, I'm leaning toward Finau minus 110 over Connors. I do want to fade him because of that lack of short game prowess combined with the lack of putting, which I think gives him a somewhat Vincent Norman-like downside. Not quite that far, but in that type of downside. I think they're similar golfers in their weaknesses. Thoughts on this one, guys?
I'd probably give the same answer of you. If you made me pick one of the 2 sides, I'd probably go the Finau route over Connors, but
yeah,
I don't necessarily want to oppose Connors this week. I think he's fairly priced where he's at.
Yeah, I like Connors a ton. I like Finau a ton. I'm indifferent on Ben On. I know the market is down on Ben On this week, which is kind of surprising to see, especially with how well he's striking the ball. But I don't want to pick on Corey Connors, I don't think. Is my short answer.
I'll probably just put a little couch change on the Finau over Connors one, but nothing significant, not an official play. Fellas, let's hop into one and done. let me pull up the standings here. We got clipped because two of our colleagues here at Action Network had Scotty Scheffler last week. So Trevi is in the lead. He is 772,000 clear of second place of Josh Golden, who is in second, who also had Scotty Scheffler last week. He is $7,000 ahead of Nick, who is $5,000 ahead of me. So we basically got a three-way tie for second almost. And then $3 million behind the leader, we have fifth, and Spencer falling down to eighth this week. Spencer, I'll let you have the floor first. Who are you considering this week? And do you guys still have Scheffler available?
Well, I would have used Scheffler last week if I did, and that's my biggest gripe to this contest. Who starts at the Century? And better yet, who uses Scotty Scheffler in the first tournament at the Century? Talk about having no self-control and just burning Scheffler the very first tournament of the year, and sitting here last week as really the only outright that I talked about on this show. I ended up adding Højgaard at a later point in the week with it, but it was a Scheffler or nothing tournament, and I'm sitting there and I wasn't able to use him. And it sucks because I'm in another one and done contest. I'll humble brag this for a second, since I'm in like last place in this Action one. I have 9.3 million in the other contest I'm in because I took Scheffler, because I took Wyndham Clark at Pebble. I have done everything wrong in this contest. I've used all the players in the wrong portions of the schedule. I think for me, it's going to be, and by the way, Nick, that was I don't even know what to tell you right now. You used one of my bluffs against me. You played Oberg after you said, "Oh, I'm going to play Rory McIlroy."
Did I guarantee it?
I mean, I'll find the clip. You damn near guaranteed it with it.
My bad.
And, you know, I guess it wouldn't have mattered because I don't know exactly what route I would have gone that would have been right, since Scotty won it and I didn't have him available. But I'm probably going to take either Sam Burns or Max Homa. I'm going to try to start telling the truth on this show of what I'm taking, which is what I did last week. I gave an honest answer with Oberg. He ended up being the pick. It just, he started so slowly that I was happy I got any money from him, if I'm being honest.
I will take the floor next. I used Homa last week, so if Spencer uses Homa, I can't use him this week. I really am open to discussion on what my pick should be. I'm not super confident in anybody. My thoughts initially coming into this context were, this is the biggest purse. Scotty won here by a zillion shots, 5 to be exact, last year. I'm going to use Scotty this week. But then heading into Riv, I was like, nobody's talking about Scotty this week. Nobody can really putt at Riv. Scotty can't putt. He can't hit it in the water. There's less variance on this golf course. I'll use Scotty at Riv. That backfired. No win for Scotty. Now I'm afraid of using somebody really big because of the water. I also want to use somebody really big because it's the biggest purse of the year. So got to capitalize this week. I am in between Will Zalatoris, Xander Schauffele, and Patrick Cantlay. I don't believe in betting on Schauffele or Cantlay, which is why I'm still in a pickle by seeing that 28-1 number by Cantlay's name, which has me thinking crazy things. But I think I'm going to save Cantlay probably for Memorial or Muirfield Village for the Memorial. And I'm leaning toward Willie Z right now just because he's so straight up the tee. I think he's going to at least get a top 20 and get at least a 6-figure payday for me this week. Nick, what are you thinking in one and done?
Yeah, I'm trying to look at the weather to see if there's going to be an edge for late early. It looks like that's potential, but it's like 25% chance of rain. It's Florida, so that could mean 150% or a 0% chance. So take that with a grain of salt. I have Scotty available. I'm leaning that way. But I think my close second, I'm not going to play Harmon if Spencer's going to play Harmon or Homa. I'm sorry. I would play Brian Harmon. It would be second. I'll let Spencer have Homa. He can enjoy a 30-second finish or whatever it's going to be. I'm okay with Brian Harmon, but again, I need to see the weather. I think Tommy Fleetwood could actually make a run at this course because no one wants to play him. I'm okay with Tommy Fleetwood.
I think from a game theory perspective, and we don't even have to talk about individual names with this, It's
Dude,
an
Tommy
interest.
Fleetwood's even with to Sam Burns. Like,
Yeah.
let's talk about that. And the market loves Tom Hoagie. It's a massive favorite to him. I know he's a favorite dog to Max Homa. So I don't know. I like
I,
Tommy Fleetwood, but again, I don't know if there's a weather edge. Probably a DFS player, super large field, one and done. But in our tournament, I'm probably just better off going Scotty Scheffler or but I think I want to use Scotty at Augusta. So I'm gonna save him and
I
then play
think
Brian Harmon this week is what
I
I'm
think
doing.
because it's such a volatile tournament that we're looking at, and then it's, yes, the biggest payout of the year, but the downside that comes into play if you incorrectly use somebody is going to be very pronounced here. I think some people are going to go too far off the beaten path. Like, I don't like, we can leave this nameless because I mean, like, I could see people. I'll give one. I could see somebody using like Doug Gim here and saying that this is like, my model likes him. He's a player. It's a volatile tournament. I'll save everybody else. I think you're going way too far if you go that direction. Even the Tom Hoagie answer to an extent. Like, I like Hoagie in the biggest purse of the year. I don't want to use Tom Hoagie when he's a very popular name. So to me, it's all the guys that you guys talked about. It's like the Xanders. I think Brian Harmon's probably as deep as I would go on the board of a name I would consider because I think he has legitimate win equity. And he's also a top, 10, 15 golfer in the world currently. So you're going to have to use him somewhere at one of these bigger events, you would think. Now, I don't know if throwing him in the biggest one would have been the game plan at the start of the year, but I think it's also a way to get different and unique. So I kind of like that Harmon. I think Xander, because of his made cut streak, is also interesting. He's more of a built-in safety than a lot of these other golfers. Xander would probably be, if there was a secondary name I was going to throw in, it would, or a third name besides Burns and Homa, it would probably be Xander. But I think I just have to kind of shoot from the hip right now and try to find as much win equity as I can to get back into this. So it will be Burns or Homa for me since my model, like, their upside's the best.
Quick trivia question, guys. No cheating. I bet you guys can name two. I bet you guys can name at least two of these three guys. But who are the three guys who are gaining at least 0.9 strokes per round on approach so far this season on the PGA Tour?
How many?
There are three. One of them, Scotty Scheffler. So there's two others.
Tony Finau and
Morikawa.
no, I'd say Morikawa's irons have not been as good. Like that's
Not
why I say
Morikawa.
It's probably Hoagie. I mean, with the way Hoagie's performing, yeah.
Yes.
Hoagie or Corey Connors.
It's probably Hoagie, Finau, and Scheffler as the three.
It's
I would
definitely
guess.
Finau.
It is those three, Spencer. So third is Tony Finau gaining 0.989 strokes on approach, so nearly one. Then
He's a dog.
You jump up nearly 2 strokes, or 0.2 of a stroke on approach. Scheffler is 1.98. So significant gap between Finau and Scheffler in third to second. And then Hoagie is 1.227 in first. What's impressive is that Scheffler and Finau have done it in 18 and 17 rounds, whereas Hoagie has had 27. So very consistent play, very reassuring, but he's going to be chalky in DFS this week because everybody's mentioning the stat everywhere. So shout out to Tom Hoagie. Hopefully he can keep it up, but I wouldn't necessarily count on it. However, we've seen him do it before, and he's played well around here. So we'll see how he does this week. Fellas, let's get into our rapid fire. We've already discussed Scotty Scheffler enough, so let's keep it moving. Rory McIlroy is 13-1. Justin Thomas is 20-1, and Xander Schauffele is 24-1. Nick, I know you like Xander, but if you had to punch a ticket on one of those two other guys, which one would you take?
I was committed to Xander. JT, who's the other guy?
Rory McIlroy.
Oh, I would take Rory at the price.
Spencer?
I think we've reached a point, and I'm not even saying that it's a bet, but I think we've reached the point with Xander where these numbers are starting to drift back up into what my model always deems to be a bettable territory. It's really hard to get there with the lack of win equity that we have seen, but Rory and Thomas at the prices that they were at were two of the bigger fade candidates for me. So I wouldn't want to bet them at that price. If I had to punch a ticket on one of them, I would rather take the larger price on Xander and kind of just know what I'm signing up for there.
I think that McIlroy and JT have decent chances of missing the cut this week, but I also think they have really decent chances of winning. I'd probably take the JT just because it's a bigger number and I don't trust Xander to win. But moving on, we got some other guys at 24-1 in Patrick Cantlay and Victor Hovland, along with Max Homa here on Bet365. Jordan Spieth is also 27-1, and Willie Z is 27-1. Excluding guys you bet on, who do you guys like here? I'll start with you, Nick.
Spieth all day. I think Spencer liking him means a lot to me, and I think it's a fair price for a guy if his irons catch fire. He can absolutely light this place up.
Spencer?
So I have the tickets on Homa and Spieth. It would be one of those two if I was going with names I had. If I don't have them available, I'll take Victor Hovland. I've kind of been very bullish on Hovland's chances throughout the entire year, and we have yet to put the pieces together during any of these events. I do think that the ability for him to putt from off the putting surface is a benefit for him. There have also been benefits for him in pretty much every other tournament that he hasn't been able to really use to his advantage. But there's a reason why Hovland's been really good at this venue. I wouldn't be shocked. Maybe asking for him to win is a big statement here, but I would not be shocked if we didn't see him start turning the pieces back around in his favor at some point. It's like when I ran this, I'll give this answer very quickly. I just took, and you would think guys who play well here are the ones that are going to produce the best results. But when I ran every single hole, and I essentially ran a simulation based off of what they have done at this course in the past, the top projected win equity player based off of that, which is a wild way to run a model, but the top projected win equity player was Victor Hovland there. So I kind of thought he had the best safety on a lot of these holes.
I really like him this week. I just don't love the recent short game numbers. So
yeah, the scrambling's bad.
That has kept me off. I had him last week, but who knows? We could do some crazy stuff between now and when I have to submit one and done and everything else later this week. Moving on to the 30-1 range, we've got Colin Morikawa at 30-1, Hideki Matsuyama 32-1, Ludwig Oberg at 32-1 as well. If you had a punch ticket on one of those three guys, Nick, who would you take?
Still believe in Oberg. Give me them. Give me him. I don't love the course. I don't know. I kind of feel like I do love the course for him.
Spencer?
No one's going to talk about him this week. Give me him.
I will go with Oberg, number one player in my model and expected total driving for this venue. We have seen kind of, I mean, historically for him is over the span of like 10 to 15 tournaments, but we have seen historically that some of these club down venues have presented a bigger upside for him than these other tests where you would expect him to be able to use his distance. I think this is a very nice bounce back spot for him. And as Nick said, nobody's going to discuss him. So I think for DFS, he becomes a really intriguing play for that reason. And even if we're talking upside markets here, I think maybe it's asking too much for him to actually win this tournament, but I think he's intriguing in a lot of different ways. I was trying to figure out a way to get exposure to him in any market. I haven't necessarily found that yet outside of the DFS answer, but I like him, and you couldn't pay me enough money to bet Colin Morikawa. I'm just going to take that stance. Like Colin Morikawa and I just do not gel together.
I'm real quick in pod change. I'm going with Victor Hovland, one and done. Confirmed.
I want to add one thing to Victor Hovland that we didn't talk about. So I kind of mentioned this at the beginning of the show, and I just think it's good to wrap back around to this. While the around the green game has been absolutely terrible, and I'm talking about this 3-putt avoidance that can be a really big propeller for him. If you look this season, he's inside of the top 10 of my model in expected 3-putt avoidance. So I think that's a really big answer for Hovland for why the upside is actually more in play this week than maybe even some of these other contests.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And Oberg, the last time we played a signature event on a course that wasn't super driver heavy and had some smaller greens, Pebble Beach, he finished second behind our guy, Wyndham Clark. So still lots of upside for Victor. So lots of upside for Ludwig Oberg. Excited to see him play at the Players, I believe, for the first time. Yes, it is his first time this week. Moving on to the next wave of golfers, we got Wyndham Clark at 37-1, right on cue. Shane Lowry, 37-1. Sam Burns is 45-1. Tommy Fleetwood is 45-1. I know you guys each have a bet on Burns and Nick. I know you're considering Fleetwood, but outside of those two guys, who do you like in this range, Nick?
Why can't I just say Fleetwood?
All right, you can say Fleetwood.
I'm going with Fleetwood. No one's going to talk about him either. I'm okay. Now that we talked about the Tin Cup, I'm still a Fleetwood believer.
Even if I throw Russell Henley in the mix here.
I do love the Russ bus, but I know Spencer believes in his putter. I don't. I think that his iron play is not nearly as elite as where it has been. I'm not going to buy the peak price for someone that doesn't have the best part of his game working as good as it usually is. Obviously, a bad iron play for he's still going to gain a stroke around pretty much approach, but he's relying on that putter. I know Spencer's data says that it's probably for real. I'm not a believer. I'm going to go with Tommy Fleetwood still.
Spencer?
If you gave me Russell Henley as an option,
yes,
and I can't take Sam Burns, I will take Russell Henley because I do believe in the putter. It's been something that I've talked about. I know this is not a pure Bermuda surface, but even if we remove the Bermuda aspect to this and you just look at similar green complexes that are going to present this soft texture to it, but also the speedy green still with it, he jumps from outside of the top 80 in expected putting to inside of the top 10 for me. So I think that this is a legitimate putter that we have. And while I agree with Nick, some of the proximity numbers leave something to be desired. He also still has the scrambling game I'm looking for. His 3-putt avoidance is inside of the top 6. And a lot of these shorter distances that he has with his irons, which is what I'm looking for to be able to salvage par in these spots, he's inside of the top 10 of my model in that area. So I think Henley is legitimately sharp with all the movements that are occurring with him. I think there's a reason why he's a favorite against every single person that you can find. If I was directly comparing, I would still rather have Sam Burns. That's why I took the Sam Burns ticket that I did. But with Burns getting removed here, I will go with Russell Henley. I think he's an intriguing person. And I didn't mention this on the show. I'm not necessarily going to get there in a lot of different ways. Like, I think there's two really interesting placement bets to consider this week. I think Russell Henley plus 190 for a top 20 would be one of them. I think that's a different way that you can try to get exposure to him. I think the second one is Adam Hadwin at 3-1. That's where ties pay in full to come top 20. I think that's another spot to credit Nick once again, where Nick was probably correct on being early to the table. And for whatever reason, it just never came to fruition the way that it should have. I think now this is a spot for Hadwin to potentially put the pieces together and hopefully give a top 20 here at 3-1.
All right, fellas. Last rapid fire question. We've got a handful of guys here at 50-1. First off, Spencer's boy, Jason Day. Next, Cameron Young, Spencer's other guy. Then Si-Woo Kim, whom we all love. Nick's boy, Brian Harmon's also 50-1 now. Sahith Theegala is 55-1. And Minwoo Lee is the final golfer under 60-1. He is also 55-1. So among Day, Young, Si-Woo Kim, Harmon, Theegala, and Minwoo Lee, who would you take an outright ticket on if I gave you one for free, Nick?
Cameron Young. I think, everybody was on him last week. I think this is a good course for him. I do. I think as much as Spencer kind of talked about his way to plot around, and obviously he could hit it very long at Arnold Palmer. I think that is a really good spot for him. His putter has been good. Did not show up last week at all, but the approach game is there. He's actually hitting fairways too. I think that this is a dangerous spot and a good price for a guy with the upside of Cameron Young. I may go him in one undone. Is that okay? What do you guys think? Can I change again? What are the rules?
I mean, you can check. All I'm going to say, Nick, is after last week's fiasco, whatever the pick is when we leave,
I'm just
here,
a fraud, no matter
yeah,
what.
I mean, that has to be the pick at this point. You can change it a million more times until we wrap this up, though.
Yeah, getting shit on here. What did you guys are you okay with Cameron Young?
I like Cameron Young. The approach numbers are very encouraging when you look at he gained over 1.5 in Dubai when Rory just beat him. Then he gained over 1 2 of the last 3 weeks, Genesis and API. Tough golf courses, gain on approach every single week, super long. Putter is volatile,
getting better.
but the putter has upside. It's not like he's a terrible
Yeah.
putter every week. He's got upside. He can gain over a stroke per round.
Damn it. All right. I know, Spencer, you don't take my word for anything anymore, but I may lean Cameron Young in one and done. Him or Victor? What do you guys think? Quick answer.
I take Victor.
I would take Victor also.
Cool. All right. I'll save Cam Young then for Augusta if I don't play Scotty. Really keep throwing curveballs your guys' way. Sorry. Proceed.
Spencer, I'll give you the guys here. It is Jason Day, Cameron Young, Siwoo Kim, Brian Harmon, all at 50-1, Sahith Theegala at 55-1, and Minwoo Lee at 55-1. Among those, who would you rather have the free ticket on?
Well, Brian Harmon, if I could take somebody that I've taken, I will play this one by the rules because I do think there are some intriguing people to consider here. One of them would be Siwoo Kim. He lost 8.6 strokes putting last week, gained 9.1 T2 green. I think that's a very consistent return, maybe like on the extreme end of it. But if you look at what he's done at Bay Hill in the past, it's been a lot of results like that where he's lost over 4 strokes with the putter. He kind of put all the wrong pieces together there for it to go in the complete wrong way. But tournament here that you get to where, you know, he was a little bit better than a neutral putter. He gained over a stroke during the year that he won it. I think something like that can still present the upside for him. I think Siwoo Kim's a very intriguing name. And then just to mention him, I'm not going to have an outright ticket, but I think he's worth mentioning after all the discussion last week. Minwoo Lee was the name that came up on every single podcast of whether it was a DFS answer, whatever it was, like, was he playable or was he a value where he was? And I kind of took a stance that I thought he wasn't even playable in DFS necessarily. He was going to have a ton of ownership. I said he was the 41st ranked player in my model. He came in 44th place there. So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of what I expected. I do believe that this tournament for him, we get an increased price in some areas of the board with it. I think this is a better tournament for him. I don't know if he necessarily finds that high-end upside to actually win this tournament, but some of those par 5 scoring numbers that he can put together here, and we've seen what he's done at this course the time he's played it. I do think Minwoo Lee has some volatile dart throw type of option. It is, you could do a lot worse than him as a buyback spot after he kind of upset everybody last week.
And you look at what he did last week, ball striking, one of his best weeks of the year. Almost as good as 2 weeks ago at the Cognizant Classic in the Palm Beaches, but he lost strokes with the putter and around the green. I think it's a sneaky buy low spot on Minwoo Lee this week. We faded him last week in our matchups because of some of the ball striking, but the ball striking came to play.
Yeah.
I think maybe we got a little bit lucky based on how we were handicapping it, but overall, still learning about Minwoo Lee's game. We mentioned on the pod how he had that run of strong play in Australia, but there was no data. So still trying to figure out what the puzzle pieces look like when he does play his best golf. And when we mentioned short game is important here, he's got that down, gained over 2 strokes putting per round in his T6 here last year. So more putter reliant than I would have liked if I want to bet on him here, but he is hot on approach. So maybe he's just a streaky player. Like we said, those strong results in Australia came in back-to-back weeks. So perhaps he's staying hot and he has some upside. All right, fellas, great discussion there. Where can we find your work this week, starting with you, Nick?
Yeah, I'll actually be doing a DFS breakdown this week on Stokastic.com. Then you could find all of Spencer and I's DFS work at Better Golf Pod on Twitter, and then Best Bets at Action Network.
All right, Spencer, where can we find your work this week?
You can find me on Twitter at TOffSports. I will have my outright betting article. I'll get a little bit deeper into what we talked about today there. Try to go back to back after hitting Scotty last week. And then you can find all my in-tournament matchups over here at Action Network. It was a 3-0 week last week, which even without the Scotty win, that was helping to salvage a lot of the tournament for me. So we were able to find some value. Grayson Murray plus 130 over Taylor Moore on Sunday. Tom Hoagie over Taylor Moore, and then Tom Hoagie plus 115 over Jason Day on, I believe that was Friday or Saturday. You can correct me, Roberto, if you know which day it was there, but there's been a lot of value to be found in these in-tournament matchups, and that's kind of the thing that I continue to try to talk about on every single show. It's that if you can find a market that you have an advantage in, and for me, it's the in-tournament bets with just the way I run my model compared to the pricing, I think that it's a very advantageous way to find an advantage. And so over 70% this year on those, and we'll try to keep the hot run going.
Yeah, those have been a lot of fun to read. I've also really enjoyed the in-tournament bets, not only reading your articles, but using some of the guys whom you mentioned as fade targets on this show, who maybe we can't find a matchup pre-tournament, but they play well, or somebody else plays really well and you can find a matchup against them. And before the tournament starts, you find a lot of guys who are similar types of players matched up against each other, which is tough to generate much of an edge, but you got different players based off of one round where there's maybe an overreaction and you can capitalize there. So I think that is the new matchup market to take advantage of. And Spencer has demonstrated that over 70% this year. So definitely check that out this weekend. I'll be tuned into that. You can find me here at the Action Network with all of our golf content. Might have a little special players related article tomorrow. So you can be sure to find me on Twitter at Roberto8213 if we do that tomorrow afternoon, late evening. Also made an appearance on the Eyes on Golf podcast earlier today. My friend Jeff Eisenband is going to put out a little March Madness themed golf bracket where you pick 3 players from each school. I can't tell you who won, but I can tell you that the Cardinal did not win, unfortunately. So be sure to check that out on wherever you get your podcast as well. But big thanks to you guys for hopping on the show, for giving me your time. This was a blast as always. Want to give a big shout out to our producers, Noah Niederhofer, David Payne, and Matt Mitchell, and everybody else at the Action Network. Very excited for the Players Championship, and here's to hoping you hit the green at TPC Sawgrass.